All right, thank you and welcome back. All right, thank you and welcome back. We'll be going into Unit 2, Compliance with Federal Fair Housing Laws, and just give you a little bit of, we're doing Section 7 here, Michigan and Federal Fair Housing. Most of this information is federal, so it would apply federally. There are some supplemental information that is specific to the state of Michigan. I just give you a few, say a few things that I should say at the beginning. Number one, I am not a current state licensee. I am simply a student practicing or studying for my state exam. I've already passed this course and I'm going through it a second time. And because of the way that I like to or prefer to study, streaming this and reading it out loud or reading it to someone, even if it is dead air, helps me to absorb the information better. So that is why I'm doing this. I am not currently a licensee. I am not receiving any monetary compensation for this. I am not a representative of the course company in which I'm using. I am trying to avoid showing the course name because I'm not endorsing or not endorsing the course in any way, and I am not a paid representative of the course. So if I'm not being compensated, then why would I endorse the company? So this is just for practice purposes leading to the state exam. You are reviewing it with me. I am not a real estate professional, nor am I trying to represent myself as one. Big part of the real estate study courses that you take, if you decide to take one, is remaining in your own lane, meaning do not represent yourself as a professional if you are not a professional. So I am not here attempting to represent myself as a professional in any way. Okay. Again, this is this is under Section 7, Michigan and Federal Fair Housing. Most of this information would pertain to any course for any state. Some of this is going to pertain specifically to the state of Michigan, and we will we will know what pertains to Michigan and what does not. Each state is slightly different. Michigan requires you to take a 40-hour course. Some states are more, some states are less. You will see that I have completed all of this, so that I'm just doing this again as a review to prepare for my state licensing exam. And I'll just say it one more time. I am not a professional, nor am I representing myself as a professional. All right. Um, each each unit has a number of lessons. There in this section there are 4 units. We have already done unit 1. All right. Unit 1 let me see here. I think I mislabeled this. So let me just, yeah, let's fix this. This is unit 2, compliance. Okay, let me just update that really quick so we have everything properly done. Yeah, we can do this here. Let's update this as well. Good deal. I didn't update everything properly, so let's just do that. All right, good. All right, so the description and everything is updated properly. That's important. All right, so each unit that we go through has a certain number of lessons, an introduction and a certain number of lessons, and I just clicked something by mistake. and then you'll see the unit resources over to the right. What I've done is I've opened all these unit resources so we can just kind of try to fly through this as quickly as possible. Each unit takes about an hour. So if there's 4 units, you're looking at about 4 hours of study time per section. Okay. Each unit has resources and then has knowledge checks on each resource. So you'll see that as we complete a resource, we'll do a little knowledge check. And at the end of the unit, once we've done all the lessons within the unit, we will take a little exam. Okay, the exam is you have to get 70% to pass, but you can take it unlimited times. That's why we're going back through. I've already done this at least once, but that's why we're going back through and restudying these things. Um, so you'll see a lot of things saying, "Oh, you've already done this. You don't need to do it anymore." I do know that. Okay, so let's talk about the introduction to Unit 2, Compliance with Federal Fair Housing Laws. Introduction and objective. Now, you may occasionally just hear like a pause. That may be me clearing my throat, um, licking my lips because they get a little dry as I chat, taking a sip of coffee or water. I will try to do that at appropriate times, but sometimes I just need that sip of coffee to keep going. I am breaking these down into multiple videos. So if you missed Unit 1, there should be a video on my page, on my channel, that you can go back and review. Unit 1 was quite long. It took us about an hour, hour and a half to complete. All right. Unit 2, Compliance with Federal Fair Housing Laws, Introduction and Objectives. Discrimination hurts. And when you're found guilty of discrimination, that's also a fair housing violation. You can be fined and lose your license and your career. Wouldn't you love to know how to avoid violating fair housing law? This unit has you covered. We'll review prohibited actions and penalties, enforcement and exemptions from the fair housing law. And we'll look at fair housing at the state and federal levels. That's a lot to pack into one unit, so keep yourself in the game and let's get started. Objectives. Explain federal and Michigan specific fair housing violations. List the penalties for fair housing violations. All right. Lesson 1, which will probably be, so show us our little resource over here. And again, these videos are for you to, if you are doing Michigan and you're doing this course, then this is a great supplement to help you go through it. But that's not what this is intended for at all. Um, as you can see up here, it says lesson 1 of 3, so this is shorter. I think the last one we had 6 or 7. Um, um, but the whole purpose of this is to study with me, but it really is to help anyone who's considering going into real estate. And what type of information are you going to need to learn and study? What kind of information is in the course? Okay. So actions prohibited by the Fair Housing Act. Your resource this time is a link directly to the Fair Housing Resource, HUD. You'll learn more about the Fair Housing Act, including which actions are prohibited. Check it out. We also recommend you bookmark this site so you can refer to it when fair housing questions arise. So let's open this. Okay, I think I already have this open. I do. Where is it? Yeah, here it is. All right, Fair Housing Act. The Fair Housing Act protects people from discrimination when they are renting or buying a home, getting a mortgage, seeking housing assistance, or engaging in other housing-related activities. Additional protections apply to federally assisted housing. Learn about the history of the Fair Housing Act, read examples of many forms of discrimination. Now, we went through this in the last, and that happens a lot in these courses. It's very redundant. They really are trying to drill certain things in. So who's protected under the Fair Housing Act? It would be race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. That should be 7. Yes. What types of housings are covered? The Fair Housing Act covers most housing. In very limited circumstances, the Act exempts owner-occupied buildings with no more than 4 units, single-family housing sold or rented by the owner without the use of an agent, and housing operated by religious organization and private clubs and limit occupancy to members. So again, we read this in the previous. What is prohibited in the sale and renting of housing? It is illegal to discriminate. It is illegal to discriminate. It is illegal discrimination, excuse me, to take any of the following actions because of race, color, religion, sex, including gender identity and sexual orientation, that's important, disability, familial status, or national origin. Refuse to rent or sell housing, refuse to negotiate for housing, otherwise make housing unavailable, set different terms, conditions, or privileges for sale or rental of a dwelling, provide a person different housing services or facilities, falsely deny that housing is available for inspection, sale, or rental, make, print, or publish any notice, statement, or advertisement with respect to the sale or rental of a dwelling that indicates any preference, limitation, or discrimination, impose different sales prices or rental charges for the sale or rental of a dwelling. All right, I'm going to stop reading this only because this is redundant and what we've already covered. So let's keep going. All right, prohibited actions. Now we may have to go back to this. Let me move this over to another screen for myself. All right, build the story with the following terms. Fill in the blank to complete each prohibited action in fair housing. You'll need to look under the heading what is prohibited in your resource to complete this activity. Refusing to rent or blank housing. Rent or sell. Refusing to negotiate for terms. Making housing unavailable. Settling different setting different housing conditions or privileges for sale, rental, or of a dwelling. Falsely denying that housing is available for inspection, sale, or rental. For profit, persuading others to sell or rent, known as blockbusting. I think I got that right. Oh, refusing to negotiate for. Okay, let's go back. I got it wrong. Refusing to rent or sell. Refusing to negotiate. Let's go. Making housing unavailable. Selling different blank conditions or privileges. Setting different terms, conditions, or privileges. Falsely denying that housing is available. Refusing to negotiate for housing. I think I got this wrong again. Let's see. Oh, I get it. I did that right that time. Okay. All right. Can you spot the... All right, so we've got some new resources over here. Federal exemptions and exemptions, case studies, and fair housing violations. So let's take a look at these. We need that one. What was the other one? Case studies. Here it is. Okay, good. So let's read through these before we do our knowledge checks. Okay, that's what we're supposed to do. Federal exemptions and exceptions. Again, this is redundant to the previous lesson, but again, we go through them multiple times to make sure that we really know them. And that's really important because just reading something once isn't going to drill it in like reading it multiple times per se. So, federal exemptions and exceptions. Fair housing law was designed to protect citizens from discrimination. It was not designed to prohibit non-discriminatory behavior or even certain behaviors that discriminate, but to protect citizens seeking housing. Following are some exemptions to coverage under the Fair Housing Act. Okay, we talked about this before. Owner-occupied buildings with no more than 4 units. Okay, now owner-occupied is very important. This exemption is commonly known as the Mrs. Murphy's exemption. Miss Murphy is the hypothetical elderly widow who's converted a portion of her home into a rental apartment to supplement her limited income. Note that this exemption doesn't apply to rental advertisement. Mrs. Murphy cannot run a discriminatory advertisement indicating, for example, that a certain religious group is not welcome to rent her apartment or room. Also, this exemption doesn't apply when a real estate agent is representing the property owner, as the law presumes agents are professionally trained and aware that housing discrimination is against the law. Exemptions and exceptions. Single-family housing sold or rented without the use of a broker. So for sale by owner. This exemption applies if the private individual owner doesn't own one or more than 3 such single-family homes at one time. Housing operated by organizations and private clubs that limit occupancy to members. Housing designed for seniors' use. Senior housing must meet specific requirements to qualify for this exemption. HUD determines that the dwelling is specifically limited for and occupied by elderly persons under a federal, state, or local government program. It's occupied solely by persons who are 62 or older. If it houses at least one person who is 55 or older in at least 80% of the occupied units and adheres to a policy that demonstrates intent to house persons who are 55 and older. When when state and federal laws conflict, as they sometimes do in fair housing human rights, the more restrictive law prevails. Now, I just want to say something about the Mrs. Murphy law, because this actually applies to me specifically. I rent to a few roommates. Right now, as a non-licensee, I have the right to, I guess, discriminate as to who I am allowed to rent to. However, once I become a licensee, even though it is owner-occupied, I can no longer discriminate. So that's a very important distinction. Okay, so let's go to case studies and fair housing violations. U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development HUD versus Pontiero in 2009. Pontorio? Ooh. Case summary. The complainant, an African American person, applied for rental housing, set an appointment with Pontorio, the respondent, the owner-landlord, and waited outside the building at the appointed time. The respondent never showed, and subsequent phone calls from the complainant inquiring about the apartment were not returned. Later, several separate sets of testers confirmed similar treatment. The Caucasian testers were shown apartments, and the respondent pursued their applications vigorously. However, the African American testers were left waiting. The respondent didn't show, and later phone calls from those testers were unanswered. In addition, Caucasian testers were quoted lower rental rates and were treated more courteously than the African American testers were. The respondent also made discriminatory comments and statements to Caucasian testers about African Americans. Protected classes involved race and color. HUD findings. The respondent violated the Fair Housing Act by engaging in discriminatory housing practices. The respondent was prohibited from discriminating because of race. The respondent was prohibited from discriminating because of race and or color in any aspect of sale, rental use, or enjoyment of a dwelling, and was therefore required to take necessary steps to remedy the effects of the illegal discriminatory conduct, to prevent similar incidents in the future, and to pay damages and a civil penalty for each violation and additional relief as deemed appropriate. HUD versus Keating, 2012. Case summary. The complainant, a mother of 2 children, told Keating, the respondent landlord, that she was pregnant. Another adult lived in the unit. The respondent evicted the tenant, stating in writing that the upcoming birth would put the total number of occupants at 5, which the respondent said was way too many for the apartment. Protected class involved familial status. HUD findings. The respondent violated the Fair Housing Act, engaging in discriminatory housing practices. The respondent was prohibited from further violations and must pay damages to compensate the complainant and her family for emotional distress, loss of housing, and inconvenience. The respondent was also charged with a civil penalty and ordered to pay additional relief. HUD versus Teen, 2012. Case summary. The complainant, a transgender female, moved into an RV park with another person. She asked RV park owner Toon, the respondent, whether she could wear female clothing in the common area of the park. The respondent denied the request, stating that there were children around the pool and it wasn't the type of atmosphere we want to promote on private property. There was no existing dress code of the park. I don't know why she even asked. Shortly after, the respondent distributed her new park rules, stating that management reserves the right to refuse entrance to the RV park to any person for any reason other than for reasons based on race, religion, handicap, color, or national origin. The rule didn't include sex or familial status, which are protected classes under the Fair Housing Act. The complainant refused to sign due to the omissions and asked that the rules be amended to include protections against sex discrimination. The respondent refused. Less than a month later, the complainant received a notice requesting her to leave, stating that she had 5 remaining days of paid stay that would be refunded if she immediately vacated the park. Attorneys for both sides were consulted. The complainant attempted to pay rent and offered the rules, signed with a statement that she was waiving any rights guaranteed by state or federal law. The RV park managers refused the rent and signed rules, saying that the respondent had directed them not to accept them. The respondent initiated eviction proceedings. HUD contacted the respondent and asked whether he would stay the eviction while HUD conducted an investigation of the complainant's fair housing complaint. The respondent declined, stating he would, quote, do everything legally and morally possible, end quote, to remove the complainant from the park. An eviction hearing was held at a local court, and the court ruled for the respondent, awarding possession of the complainant's lot to the park, $2,500 in attorney fees and $116 in court costs. The complainant was evicted from the property and moved her RV from the park. So this is a case where the complainant did not win. Protected class involved sex. HUD filings. The respondent was prohibited from discriminating because of sex against any person in any aspect of the sale or rental of a dwelling. As such, the respondent must pay monetary damages, a civil penalty of $16,000 against each complaint. Oh, they did get in trouble. Okay, I misread that. Okay, I see. That was just the summary. Okay. The respondent was prohibited from discriminating because of sex against any person in any aspect of the sale or rental of a dwelling. As such, the respondent must pay monetary damages, a civil penalty of $16,000 against each complainant for its violation of the act, and additional relief as may be appropriate. So, all right. What I don't understand in the very beginning is why anybody would ask for permission to what they should wear. Just wear what you want to wear. But that was 2012. That was a dozen years ago, right? Things hopefully have changed. HUD versus Shiminish. Shiminish? I don't know if I'm saying that right. This is 2012. Case summary. The complainant, a blind person with back issues, sometimes required the use of a walker. She also suffered from mental disorders, including depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. Shiminish, the respondent, was the owner and manager of a 3-unit residential property. I think I know where this is going. The complainant had an emotional support dog that was identified as such with a marked pouch and tags and was registered with the National Service Animal Registry. The respondent had a no pet policy. Owner and manager of a 3-unit. Okay. Didn't say whether she lives there, though. We'll find out. When the complainant met the respondent at his rental property and saw the dog, he told her about his no pet policy. She informed him that the dog was a support animal, and he again said no pets. The complainant tried to show the respondent the dog's support animal certification paperwork, but he refused to see it, saying he didn't care what it said. The complainant then asked for the respondent's name. He asked why, and she said she would be reporting him. The complainant took down the contact information from the respondent's truck and left, saying she no longer wished to rent from him, but would be reporting him. Protected class involved disability HUD findings. The respondent was prohibited from discriminating on the basis of disability. Damages were awarding, including a $16,000 civil penalty, and any additional relief is appropriate. It was only 3 units, but I'm guessing they didn't live in any of them, so that they didn't qualify for that Mrs. Murphy exemption rule. All right, so let's go through our knowledge check. Can you support the prohibited actions? Let's see if you can identify whether any of the following scenarios is a prohibited action. To help you out, we've added a new resource for you that contains summaries of a few actual cases involving discrimination charges. A property manager refuses to show a property to a blind person with a guide dog because the owner doesn't allow pets. That is definitely prohibited. A homeowner makes a room available for rent in her residence and specifies in the online advertisement that only women need apply. That is a prohibited. You can discriminate or you can allow only women, but you can't put it in an ad. A selling agent doesn't respond to requests to view a listed property because the person's foreign accent in the voicemail is very thick. It's very prohibited. While reviewing offers with the sellers, an agent mentions that one of the potential buyers looked like a man wearing women's clothing. The sellers refuse to consider the offer because they don't think the neighbors would be happy if they sold their house to someone who might be transgender or gay. Definitely prohibited. A landlord lies to a young pregnant woman and tells her there are no units available in the complex because the only one available is right next to his apartment, and he can't stand the sound of crying babies. Well, it doesn't say how many apartment units, so we're going to assume there's more than 4, so we're going to say prohibited. And that's it. None of these are not prohibited. Okay. Simple, easy peasy. All right. On to lesson 2, penalties. To end the end of a career. When Carla's boss asked her to screen out unsavory tenants, she gave in. She didn't want to lose her position as property manager and didn't know what else to do. Now she's about to lose a whole lot more than her job as a property manager. She called her mom to ask for help. Mom, I'm in trouble. You know that landlord I've been working for. He doesn't like gays or Jews or anyone on assistance programs. He said he'd fire me if I didn't screen these applicants out. So I did what he said. Carla, what were you thinking? Her mom screamed. I know, Mom. I'm not proud of what I did. Well, you were just following the landlord's orders, right? They can't get you for that, can they? Yes, I was just following the orders. But I am the real estate professional. I'm supposed to know better. Next came the really hard part. Carla steeled herself and continued, Mom, can I borrow some money? I'm going to need a lawyer. and there may be fines. The thing is, I don't know when I can pay you back. If I lose my license, it might be a while. Of course, honey, we'll do what we can. You don't think you're not going to go to jail for this, are you? No, I don't think I'll go to jail. I'm meeting with my lawyer later today. I'll call you when the meeting's over. All right, penalties for fair housing violations in Michigan. Let's see. Might be this one or this one. There it is. All right, let's move this over. Yeah, we've already read the exemptions. Where did this go? Okay. What is this one? Yeah, we've read that too. Okay. Just trying to keep them in order here. Penalties for fair housing violations in Michigan. The Fair Housing Act is enforced through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. HUD responds to consumer complaints and, if merited, will refer the case to an administrative law judge, at which point it may be heard in a federal civil court if the complainant wishes. Fines levied by the civil court may include civil penalties up to $21,039 for a first offense, $52,596 for a subsequent violation within 5 years, and $105,194 if two or more violations occur within a 7-year period. Oof. Complainants may choose to bypass HUD and have the case heard by a federal district court. This must occur within 1 year of the alleged violation. If a violation has been filed with HUD, the deadline for civil suit is 2 years and may be filed as long as the complainant hasn't signed a conciliation agreement or the administrative hearing hasn't happened. If the court finds in favor of the complainant, it may issue an injunction against the violator, award actual and/or punitive damages without limitation. In addition, the U.S. Attorney General, Department of Justice, may file a civil suit in a U.S. district court if it believes that a pattern of discriminatory practice exists. The court may issue an injunction against the violator, impose fines as much as $50,000 for first offense and $100,000 for subsequent violations. In Michigan, complaints of violation of the Human Rights Act can be filed with the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. To meet the deadline for filing, the complainant must be filed with 180 days of alleged violation. Filing can occur as a complaint to the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, a complaint to a local commission on human relations, or through a private civil lawsuit. The Michigan Civil Rights Commission investigates and holds hearings on matters of unfair housing practices and orders remedial action that may include requiring changes in policies and practices, injunctive relief given to the complainant, assessing that's the word, assessing compensatory damages and reimbursement of attorney fees, imposing civil fines and penalties of as much as $10,000 for the first offense, $25,000 for subsequent offense within a 5-year period, and $50,000 for two or more within a 7-year period. If a case is dismissed, the person against whom the complaint was filed can request that the complaining party pay actual court and attorney fees, or ask for an injunction to prevent the sale of the property. All right. So let's go into our knowledge check. While screening potential tenants and working with residents at the apartments she manages, Kara violated the Fair Housing Act on multiple occasions. Tenants and applicants filed complaints against her. The case is now being heard in federal civil court. Which entity generally enforces the Fair Housing Act? Is it the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Environmental Protection Agency? No. District Department of the Environment? No. Department of Human Resources? No. So this is an easy one. Department of Human and Urban Development, Housing and Urban Development. Kara's penalties. This is not the first time Kara has been prosecuted for fair housing violations, and the list of charges is long. What penalties must she face? Might she face? Pay for actual damages, potential penalty. A $50,000 fine, potential penalty. Pay for punitive damages, potential. 2-year sentence, not a potential. Pay legal fees for the victims, potential. Let's see if we got any of those. Yep, we got them all right. So all kinds of fees, but no prison time. The Johnsons file suit. Build the story using the following terms. Choose the appropriate text for each blank to complete the story. Kara ended up paying out more than $110,000 for her collection of violations among other penalties. The local paper published a story about the case. After that, many other people Kara had discriminated against realized that they too could file a civil suit, that she might have to pay damages to them as well. The Johnson family wants to file a civil suit. The discrimination occurred 3 months ago. They have not filed a complaint with HUD, but want to go straight to a civil suit. They can do this as long as they file suit within 180 days. Oh, HUD is different, isn't it? Let's see. Let's see. Where is that resource for us? This must occur within 1 year. So for HUD, we got to do it within 1 year. If they file suit with HUD first, then their deadline is extended and they can file a civil suit within, man, 2 years. Of the event. The Lutz family also wanted to file a civil suit for discrimination that occurred 3 years ago. They can't because the violation was too long ago. All right. Michigan penalties for fair housing violation recap. The Michigan Department of Civil Rights has put together a poster that you can provide to clients if they feel they have been discriminated against. It includes instructions on how to file a complaint. We've provided a copy for you in your resources, the Michigan discrimination poster. Take a look at this here in a minute. Yeah, here's your Michigan. Is this the Michigan discrimination poster? Yeah, we'll just take a quick look at it. That's it. So if you feel like you've been discriminated for any of these things, you can call this number here. Okay. All right, let's keep going. All right, so we just did penalties. Or no, we just did, I think we just did fair housing enforcement. Let me look again. Because I forget now. Oh, this should tell us right here. Section 7, Unit 2. Unit 2. 2. Unit 2. Yeah. Oh, no, that's the unit. That doesn't say what lesson. Yeah. Unit 2, Lesson 3. Have we not got to this yet? Let's see. Should. Filing a fair housing complaint. Okay. All right. So, yeah, Lesson 3. That's where we're at. Okay. Fair housing enforcement. Laws only work if there is a reason to follow them. Sure, most of us will do what's right regardless, but without enforcement of the laws, there are some who would not. The tooth of any law is its enforcing agency and possible repercussions for violation. All right, filing a fair housing complaint. The Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity is a part of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The FHEO administers and enforces federal fair housing laws. It also establishes policies to ensure equal access to housing choice and opportunity. Members of a protected class, race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or disability, who believe they have been victims of housing discrimination may file fair housing complaints online directly from HUD's website. A complaint must be filed within 1 year from the time the suspected discrimination occurred. When a complaint is received, a fair housing specialist reviews it to determine whether the complaint involves a potential violation of the Fair Housing Act. The specialist contacts the consumer for additional information to complete this discrimination determination. Boy, if the specialist decides that the Fair Housing Act may have been violated, the specialist helps the consumer file an official housing discrimination complaint. The online complaint form is fairly straightforward and asks, what happened? The consumer must provide a description of the alleged discrimination. Why do you believe discrimination occurred? The consumer must cite his protected class status. Who do you believe discriminated against you? This must include the contact information. Where did the discrimination occur? Excuse me. This information should include an address, city, state, and zip. When did the discrimination last occur? The consumer is also asked whether the discrimination is continuous or ongoing. All right, our knowledge check. Which of these groups is responsible for receiving fair housing complaints? Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. I had to go back and reread that. Sometimes I read so fast I don't absorb. Members of a federally protected class who believe they have been victims of housing discrimination can file a complaint directly on HUD's website. Which four of these statements about filing a complaint are true? A real estate licensee can file a complaint for a victim? No, I don't think so. Complaints must be filed with 1 year from the time the suspected discrimination occurred? Yes. The complaint form asks the consumer to describe the alleged discrimination? Yes. The victim must describe how he would like the complaint to be resolved? No. Complaints must specify the victim's protected class status, who perpetrated the discrimination, and exactly where the discrimination occurred. Yes. A fair housing specialist is the first to review a victim's complaint. Yep, good deal. I believe that's going to be the end of lesson 3. And we're rounding toward the end here. We're going into lesson 4. I believe we're only going to have exemptions again. I believe we've read over these exemptions. But we'll go through it again. As important as fair housing is, it was never intended to limit personal freedom or to create awkward housing situations. Fair housing rules have specific exemptions to prevent uncomfortable situations. Let's take a look at your resource. Federal Fair Housing Law exemptions. Okay, we did go through this twice already, so I'm not going to go through it, but other than just the bullet point, owner-occupied dwellings with no more than 4 family units, otherwise known as the Mrs. Murphy Law. We've talked about that a couple of times now. Single-family housing sold or rented without the use of a broker, so for sale by owner. Housing operated by religious organizations and private clubs that are limited occupancy to members. Housing designed for senior use. Now remember, even though there are some exemptions, we can never, ever discriminate based on race. All right. There are a handful of exemptions to fair housing laws. For example, let's say Miss Murphy is planning to rent out a room in her home. She's very concerned about the idea of a man in her home, and she thinks the family will be too boisterous, so she wants to rent only to a single young woman. Technically, she's allowed to screen people accordingly, but even in this scenario, she can cross the line into violating fair housing laws. Which two of these actions would violate fair housing laws? She puts an ad on Bless you. She puts an ad on Craigslist that specifies young single women only. You cannot put any kind of discriminatory ad out there. She asks her friends if they know of anyone. That's not going to violate anything. She hires a real estate agent to help find a single white tenant. So yes, you can't do either of those things. All right, Mrs. Murphy discriminates. Why can't why can't Carly? Carly, the property manager for several large apartment complexes, would like to control her tenant base just like Miss Murphy does. Why is Miss Murphy allowed to discriminate when Carly isn't? Miss Murphy lives in the property, which has fewer than 4 rental units. Miss Murphy is widow. She's elderly. Miss Murphy is clear about the type of person she's looking for. So the answer is um, she lives there with less than 4 units. Okay, good deal. Real estate professionals and the Miss Murphy exemption. As a licensed professional, you're held to a higher standard. Whether you get involved, fair housing laws will whenever you get involved, fair housing laws will apply. You're never allowed to violate them even if you're helping Miss Murphy and Miss Murphy meets all of the exemption requirements. The takeaway here is that although this exemption does exist according to law, it will never apply to you as a real estate professional. You'll need to learn how to avoid discrimination no matter the circumstances. All right, let's go through senior housing exemptions. One of the more commonly used exemptions is for senior living. While most people can't discriminate against families with children, housing designed specifically for seniors is allowed to do exactly that, but only if the housing meets certain requirements. Indicate whether the following descriptions meet these requirements or not. All of the residents at Shady Pines are at least 62. Meets minimum requirements. HUD determines the complex was specifically designed for seniors. Meets requirements. All of the residents, 80%, of the residents, 80% are 55 years or older, and there's a policy in place to keep it that way. That meets the exemptions. Half of the residents are older than 50, and there are no children. Does not meet the requirements. Good. All right, more exemptions. You're a licensee representing a client who wants to buy a condo. She'd like to buy a unit in a small complex near her work. You discover that the complex does have an available unit, and you contact the broker. You ask if you can show your client the unit, but the broker refuses, saying he can't sell to your client. Under what circumstances would this be allowed under fair housing law? All right. The owner is 62 years of age or older. It's over 62. The property is owned by a religious organization or private club. The units are designed for large family. The current residents are all male. Residency in the condo complex is restricted to members of the organization that owns the complex. Um, oof. It's either B or E. Property is owned by a religious organization. Oh, under what two circumstances? Okay, well, those are the two. Property is owned by a religious organization or private club. The residency in the condo complex is restricted to members of the organization that owns the complex. Yep. Still seems unfair to me, but whatever. Can't discriminate unless you join a club that discriminates, I guess. Is that the way it works? All right, so we have gone through all 4 lessons. Now we're going to do our unit exam. Of course, it's going to come up and say, you've already done this. Let's retake it, and we got 6 questions. We got to get at least 70% right. Complaints of civil rights violations in Michigan can be filed with the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. Well, no. The Michigan Civil Rights Commission, perhaps. The Michigan Department of Human Resources, no. The Office of Human Rights. We're going to say that one. Civil Rights, Michigan Civil Rights. Uh, did it say specifically? Did we see? Oh, here we go. Human Rights Act can be filed with the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. Yay! We got that. Okay, good. When state and federal laws differ, as they sometimes do with fair housing and or human rights, which of these statements is true? State and local law override federal law. That is not true. State lawmakers decide which laws prevailed. Not true. The conflicting law is invalidated, effectively removing the law's requirement. Not true. The state law may not remove rights granted to citizens under federal law. That is our answer. What type of fair housing discrimination has occurred when applicants of Middle Eastern and South Asian descent are denied a place to live and told the units have been rented when they have not? This would be our national origin. Middle Eastern or South African is national origin. Color, middle, yeah. Colin wants to file a fair housing. I know I'm going through this rather quickly, but I also know that if you're watching this after this video after I've made it, you can pause it as needed. Colin wants to file a fair housing discrimination complaint. He decides to bypass HUD and file a civil suit in a federal district court instead. He must do this with how many days of an alleged violation? 6 months or 1 year? Let's go with this here. Fines, let's see. Complaints may also bypass one, 1 year. Okay, let's go 1 year. Which of these situations would be exempt from most provisions of the Federal Fair Housing Act? Which of these situations would be exempt from most provisions? A homeowner engages a real estate professional to rent out his basement apartment? Nope. Investor owns and rents out 5? Nope. A nonprofit owns 20 properties that only rents to Caucasian families? No. The local Elks Club owns a property that's rented only to Elk Club members. That is correct. Which of these is something that is not required in the initial fair housing complaint forms? A description of the alleged discrimination? No, that's required. A notarized copy of the complaint description? I believe that was going to be it. The applicable protected class of the complainant? Required. The physical location of the discrimination event? Required. Okay, let's see how we did. 100%, yay! All right, we have finished Unit 2. I'm going to go ahead and go back to our section here. Again, this is, we'll go back to Course Home. We are Section 7. As you can see, there are 19 sections of this entire thing here. We just finished Unit 2. We're going to be going on to Unit 3, Michigan Fair Housing. So this will be very specific to Michigan. There are 3 lessons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 resources, which means it's probably not terribly long, but I am going to give myself a 15-minute break, and I'm going to stop the video for that 15 minutes. Well, I'll start up, but I'll stop the video for 15 minutes and then start back up, and that allows these videos to be broken up based on the section and the unit. That way you can start and stop them as you would like. Again, if you missed Unit 1 or 2, there you will see separate videos for these.